Welcome to the Vine Life Podcast. I'm Tony Clark, your host. My special guest today is Lori Morrow. Lori is the Vice President and a board member of Women in Apologetics. WIA is a Christian nonprofit organization whose sole focus is to educate, equip, and encourage women in Christian apologetics. She's also the host of WIA's monthly YouTube show called Voices of WIA, in which she interviews female apologists across various specialties. Lori has a master's degree in Christian Apologetics from Biola University, and she's also a Colson Fellow. Now, more information about Lori and also Women in Apologetics, you can simply go to their website, and it's womeninapologetics.com. Once again, womeninapologetics.com. And you can certainly find more about Lori and her organization as well. But Lori, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
I'm so pleased to be here. Like I said, I love what WIA does. And anytime I get a chance to talk about the good work that she's doing, I am more than happy. So thank you very much for giving us this opportunity.
Absolutely. I definitely admired your organization for a number of years. And before I want to get into your backstory and how you got into this, but I know that the beginning of any podcast is most important in the first 3 to 5 minutes, because that's when most people listen and most people turn off, just according to stats. But Women in Apologetics, for the audience, first of all, what does apologetics mean, and why is it so important to get women involved?
Great question. Apologetics comes from the Greek word apologia, which means or refers to a legal defense, a formal written position on an issue, the way an attorney would defend a client who is being charged with something, and that defense would be given in a court to essentially explain or defend against the charges. So apologetics comes from there, the idea being that we're going to give a defense for why we believe Christianity to be true.
Absolutely. And just hearing that on the outset, for those that aren't familiar with that word, it sounds like apology. We're going to apologize for the Christian. Is that what it means?
Yeah, we get that all the time. Like you Christians need to apologize, or why are you teaching Christians to apologize? We shouldn't apologize for our faith. And luckily, that's not what we're doing.
Absolutely. And in your title in your organization, it's Women in Apologetics. And just from the foundation of your organization, why is it so important that more women get involved in the area of Christian apologetics?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's such a good question. Primarily because we women have mission fields in our back seats and our backyards. And when we go into those mission fields, there's no reason to think in a completely secularized culture where things are slightly more hostile to Christianity than they have been previously, there's no reason to think that that will necessarily go smoothly. We are going to encounter objections and challenges to the truth of Christianity or even the goodness of Christianity. And so if you're like most Christian women, in order to overcome and deal with those challenges and objections, you're going to need a specific set of skills in order to have those conversations well. And most of us don't encounter those materials, those arguments, those skill sets just in our regular daily devotional life or in our Sunday school classes. We have to get it from somewhere specific. We have to pursue it. So Women in Apologetics wants to fill that gap really for women and be the place where they know they can go to get that kind of information. And typically we women, I think we are uniquely suited to this task because most women, faith conversations are hard. They can be hard no matter what the topic is, but women typically have hard conversations over homemade brownies and coffee. We like relationship. We want to have a conversation that survives, a relationship that survives that conversation. So we are perfect for going into lost communities and having conversations with lost people with a sense of gentleness and grace. And so we are perfectly suited to this task. Although a lot of women don't think that apologetics is interesting. Many of them think that it's academic and dry and maybe just for the guys. And it's really not. We really have such a good gift and a good opportunity to use our apologetics with our kids' friends, our kids' friends' parents, school teachers, you name it. We run into so many audiences of people that need what we have to offer. And we're particularly good at doing it just through our demeanor. In our primacy of relationships, typically. It helps us spot counterfeits. It helps us prepare our children to pay the price for following Jesus if that happens. It gives us great mental and spiritual habits of discernment and thinking. And so it's just good all the way around. It is a wonderful tool for Christian women. And I really kind of think it's a missing element in discipleship. It does tend to leapfrog your spiritual growth when you get into apologetics. And so there's just several really good reasons why women should get involved and why they're uniquely kind of inclined to be good at it.
And you mentioned that I haven't really thought of it that way before, but we tend to think of apologetics as a male-dominated field, and it probably is. But I know, as a husband, as a dad, as a father, you ladies can go into areas where we don't have access to, and you were just talking about that. And you've got a mission field that we guys would never have. That's fascinating.
Yeah, and typically most situations are such that men will work outside the home, women may or may not. So therefore, men see the same people every day. And we women, we see a host of people. We see teachers, we see the dry cleaners, the grocers, the babysitters, the neighbors. We have this whole host of people that we encounter every day. Even if we do work, we still end up doing a lot of the taxi driving to school and errand running and that sort of thing. And so we really are faced with just your average everyday person way more often than say a man who's busy all day in the office earning a living. And so we have so much opportunity, so much really good opportunity to speak to people who need what we have.
And Lori, I'm thinking of questions here. One of those questions is maybe a rebuttal to what you're talking about. I think it's weak, but here it is. It may be an argument from the pews, folks that have been lifelong church attenders. They're in Christ. They know the Lord, but their argument is, I read my Bible, Lori. I attend Bible studies. I do regular devotions. I'm good. How does that work in the year 2025? Is that good enough?
I don't think so. I think that, for one thing, Jesus told us not to stay in the pews. We're supposed to go out and make disciples of all nations. And so when you do, especially, like I said earlier, especially today, when there's so much secularism and there's so much more hostility toward Christianity than there used to be, particularly people who have kind of got the idea that all truths are true or that we shouldn't correct anybody, it's entirely possible to go to someone with a heartfelt testimony or some really sweet Bible verses, some compelling Bible verses that might ordinarily really change someone's mind. That person can take all of that information that you give them and say, well, that's good for you, but that doesn't work for me. Jesus doesn't work for me. Jesus only works for you. And I'm glad you found what works for you, but it doesn't necessarily mean it works for me. And so in order to bridge that gap, we've got to be able to demonstrate or explain in some relevant, meaningful way that Jesus isn't just a club we joined, that Jesus is true for everyone. And so just knowing your scriptures or just knowing that you are saved or just having even a really compelling testimony, it's very, very limited as to what that can accomplish with a secular world.
Yeah. It seems like you turn on the news and then, we're seeing that we're exchanging light for darkness, right? And evil for good and good for evil. And we're calling those things that are evil good today. And I think a lot of us as Christians, and you deal specifically more or less with women. So I'm going to try to speak from that perspective. Say I'm a woman listening to the podcast or I'm watching, but Lori, I'm intimidated because I'm afraid I'm going to get laughed at because of my faith. How can I equip myself to stand up and speak truth in a common sense, in a logical manner to rebut some of what the world is saying? If that makes any sense.
Yeah, sure. I think that's probably the primary reason why a lot of Christians don't more regularly talk to their lost neighbors and family and friends is because they don't know if they're going to get stumped by a question. And so my first response would be, we have to get over the fear of being stumped. Just because someone asks you a question that you don't know the answer to, that does not mean that there isn't an answer, that it isn't available. It is a totally legitimate response to say, I don't know the answer to that question, but I think that there is an answer to the question and I can go find it and come back to you, or we can go find it together. But there is an answer. The Christianity has the receipts. Let's go find the answer together. So that's the first thing that I would want to do is anytime you get into a situation where you feel like you might be uncomfortable is to kind of take off your Christian hat and put on your student hat. Find out what exactly is their objection. That you might hear it one way, they might actually be expressing it another way. Just learn everything that you can about why they feel the way they feel, what prompted their objection, and then go do some digging, go do some research, either, like I said, by yourself or with them, and then find the answers. I think that's just the easiest on-ramp to learning apologetics, is just deciding that you don't have to have all the answers first, but you do have to be willing to get into those conversations, and then you can go find the answers. There's nothing wrong with that. It's easier if you've done a little study and a little prep work and you know the answers ahead of time. That's a whole lot more comfortable. But it shouldn't hold you back from attempting to reach the lost with the truth of Christ.
Very well said. And I'm just curious what WIA is currently dealing with in the era that we live in today. What are some major issues that the world is dealing with, that the church is dealing with, that Women in Apologetics is dealing with directly? In other words, you're equipping women to deal with some of these hot button issues today. What are some of those?
One of the things that we have done, and in fact, we just put an email together and gathered some statistics. We have managed to produce, I think the number was 34, 40 quick guides or infographics or digital resources of some sort that might be comparing Christianity to another worldview. It might be listing some evidences or arguments, but we have something like 30 or 40 digital resources that are available that women can download, and that kind of helps them be a list of some of the relevant topics, the relevant sources that they can consult. So that's a really good resource for us. We have, I think, over 1,000 hours of academy courses. So we have a class on truth, one on logic, one on worldview. We also have those bundled together. We have a course on Islam, and all of our previous conferences are bundled into online courses as well. So there's just hundreds of hours of topical conversations and education on various topics in the field of apologetics that you can simply take. Some of them are paid, some of them are free, but they're all available on our website. And so we have all of that information available. And then every single year we have, probably our flagship event is our conference. So we typically we start on a Friday evening, and then we pick up on Saturday morning and go the bulk of the day on Saturday, typically with 3 keynote speakers and then probably 4 breakout sessions every single year. So between all of that, we're working to add some online events. We're working on having local meetups where women can get together and talk about these things in their own areas, get to know other women who are studying apologetics, and we're facilitating that. So we really are working hard to provide as much information, kind of a library of resources for your average Christian woman who wants to learn these things, so she doesn't have to learn them alone, and so that she can learn them online if she needs to. If there isn't any other resource at her church, she can always come to us, and we can help her sort through all the information that we have so that she can get the topics and the resources that she needs.
Lori, there's a great quote that I read today, and it says, "Truth carries with it confrontation. Truth demands confrontation, loving confrontation, but confrontation nevertheless." Now, that's by a fellow named Francis Schaeffer that was written many years ago. How does that relate to Women in Apologetics, or does it?
I think that he's right. First of all, I'm a huge Schaeffer fan. I've read a lot of Schaeffer. I love him. I think because human beings always want to be the creators of their own truth. They really want to impersonate God, to step into his shoes and kind of create truth as they would prefer it to be. And that's always going to come into conflict with the absolute truth. And so we definitely have to have those confrontations lovingly, which is, like I said earlier, I think women are uniquely gifted to play that part and have loving, confrontationally soft, gentle, warm, well-directed conversations that are ultimately for the purpose of bringing someone along and not necessarily separating friendships or family members or any other kind of relationship. And so, we deal with that all the time. And one of the things, in fact, we have a sticker in our shop that says gentleness and respect, because we never want to forget that. We never want to forget to be gentle and respectful as we're having these conversations. But human truth is always going to collide with the absolute truth. And so we have to learn to navigate that as compellingly and as warmly as possible. In fact, Schaeffer says something else all the time that I've really come to appreciate. He talks about pushing a man off his pedestal, the pedestal being his presuppositions, his incorrect presuppositions. But when you do that, he's got to know that you love him. He's got to know that you have his best interest in mind when that happens. And so that's just naturally a part of, it's part of the skill that you learn when you're learning apologetics.
Yeah, and presenting truth and love is not always easy to do. It's not always an easy
Sure.
thing to do.
Sure.
I'm curious, Lori, what really lit the fire in your belly to get into apologetics, to go on to Biola University, to become a Colson Fellow? There must have been a spark at some point in your Christian experience that said, "I want to venture into apologetics." Can you
Yeah.
dig
So
into
it
that a
was
little bit?
actually it was actually kind of a part A and a part B, part one and part two, something like that. I had about 25 years ago, I recommitted my life to the Lord, and I rebuilt my faith from scratch. And one of the things that I decided to do was read my Bible daily and join a Bible study. And so I had managed to jump into a Bible study with some friends, which was going really well. And I put my kids in a Wednesday night church program, the children's program at our church. But we had a new pastor, and it was during that whole emergent church era in the early 90s. And he was very determined to establish himself as a trustworthy biblical pastor since he was relatively new to our church. And so he, from the pulpit, announced that he had this new Bible study. He made a big deal out of it. And he said, I can almost guarantee you have never been to a Bible study like this. So if you are available on Wednesday night, you need to come to this Bible study. I didn't even know what it was called. I just showed up because Bible study had become a thing that I really wanted to be involved in. And so my kids were there. I went to Bible study, and I didn't even know the name of the class. I walked in, they hand me the materials, and the Bible study is called How We Know the Bible is the Bible. So it wasn't really a Bible study per se. It was an apologetics class, but I didn't know that. He never used that word. To my knowledge and to my recollection, he never called it an apologetics class. He just put this question before us and said, Christian, how do you know that your Bible really is the Bible? Well, I had just started reading my Bible, hungrily for the first time in a long time. And so I thought this was the coolest thing. I thought, I don't know that I've ever thought to ask that question. And I am not even sure I knew that was a question you could ask or would have an answer to. So I was just immediately sucked into this class. It was about 4 weeks. I loved every minute. I was fascinated by everything that he had to say. And by the time the class was over, I was absolutely convinced that the Bible was completely trustworthy, to the extent that I sat down and I think I was reading one of Paul's epistles at one morning, and I thought, gosh, it feels like I'm leaning over the shoulder of Paul, peeking over his shoulder while he writes. I had so much confidence in the Bible. So life went on, and several years later, I found myself in a different church, and I was teaching some classes, Sunday school classes, and something was going on in this church. There were some inconsistencies. Some of us were teaching Bible study or Sunday school, and there was a significant group of people within the church that weren't necessarily convinced that the Bible was authoritative. And I really didn't understand how that could happen in a healthy, normal church. And so I was encouraged to take some classes online because I was working with the women's ministry, and I just accidentally bumped into Biola's apologetics program. And I had barely even heard the word apologetics. I knew from hindsight that original class I had taken at my old church was an apologetics class. And I bumped into the program at Biola, and I started reading the titles of the classes. And literally my heart started to beat. I was like, oh my gosh, this is what the church needs. I had also been to a prayer breakfast where the speaker was an apologist, and he was saying things like, for the last 10 or 20 years, we've been in a period where faith is just considered irrelevant. Well, that's shifting now. We're moving into an era where the things of God are going to be considered immoral or dangerous. And I thought, how is that even possible? How is that even a thing? I don't even understand how people can think such things. And so I knew then that I wanted to help. I wanted to roll up my sleeves, and I wanted to help the church. I wanted to help my church. I wanted to help the big C church. I just wanted to help. And so I already had 2 graduate degrees. The last thing I needed was another graduate degree, but I just could not help the feeling that was what I was supposed to learn and what I was supposed to do. I was so drawn to it. It felt so timely and so important. So I filled out the application and clicked submit. A couple years later, 2 or 3 years later, I graduated from that program, and I have just loved it. It's been my favorite thing that I've done in my life so far, except for having children and a family. I love apologetics. I love being a part of it. I love seeing the lights go on in women's faces when they realize, when they're dealing with a child or a husband or just a difficult workplace, when they have resources, that when the lights go on and they realize that Christianity has the receipts and they don't have to be afraid about talking about it, that's nothing but a win. That just goes down in the win column. And so I don't think I'll ever get over that.
Again, that's a pretty amazing and encouraging story. And I think, men and women, I think a lot of us, we put our faith in Christ, but we really can't explain why we did that or the
Sure.
historical relevance of Jesus of Nazareth, that he was actually a person, that he actually historical evidence from the apostles, from the life of Christ. We can't talk about that because we just don't know. Many of us don't know any more than John 3:16. And that's certainly great for salvation, but let's go beyond that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's true. We really do need to know why we're Christians and why it's true. And particularly in today's cultural climate, the idea is that it doesn't really matter what you believe. You can believe anything, and all philosophies, all thought systems, all perspectives, they should all be valued equally. And so when that happens, it makes it very difficult to convince someone that Christianity is true. So you have to overcome that somehow. And the way that you do that is by teaching these evidences, or by understanding these evidences, that Christianity is actually true for everyone, and that people who haven't come to it yet, or who have chosen something else, are missing out on something good, something that's very good and very real. And by studying your Bible devotionally and growing in the image of Christ, in the conformity to the image of Christ, which is certainly all of our responsibility to do that. But that all by itself won't help you find the tools that you need to relate to the people who are outside the church walls, who need to be convinced why they should come inside and be part of our family, be part of our belief system, why they need to become Christians. And so we have to understand apologetics is a really good bridge to help those people realize that they need to come inside, that there's something that's for them too.
Women in apologetics, and if you're okay, we'll just kind of touch on your 5 main initiatives that I got from your website. And I think these are great for equipping individuals and women specifically. But the first one is you guys hold a annual WIA conference. Tell me about that.
Yes. We have a conference every year. It's kind of our flagship event. It's our favorite thing. My favorite things about our conference is that, there's two. I will hear women say over and over and over at our conferences, I've been in church all my life. I've never heard this stuff before. I can't believe this has been here, and that I haven't been exposed to it before. So that's usually a light bulb moment in and of itself. And then the second thing I hear is, nobody else in my church is learning apologetics. Nobody else is excited about it. This is where I find the women who are like me, who are interested in it and are learning it and are excited about it and want to grow in their apologetics capabilities and their understanding. So when I'm at the conference, I get to hang with my people. I get to talk to my people. I get to grow with the people who are excited about the same things I'm excited about. And so I think that makes us unique in women's conferences. So we have a conference every year. This fall in 2025, it'll be in Grapevine, the last weekend of September, but we already have our weekend set for next year as well. We're already planning next year's conference, which is also in September, just a little bit earlier, and it'll be in Florida. So you can find that information depending on when this episode airs. You can find that information on our website. There are always conference pages, either the current one or the upcoming one. So you can find that information if you're interested. You can buy tickets. There's usually information listed as to who's speaking, what the theme is, what the keynote sessions are versus what the breakout sessions are. So all that information is listed on our website. And we would love to have you, because it really is a very unique opportunity for Christian women to learn together, to meet one another, and to grow in their faith in ways that they probably don't get to grow otherwise.
Well, again, sounds very exciting. Number two of the initiatives is you guys provide scholarship opportunities. Tell us about that.
Well, we're working on that. We've done some in the past, specifically scholarships to our conferences. If the fees is a hardship for someone to be able to afford to be able to come to the conference. We've also had scholarships to take some of the classes, whether it's our classes or someone else's, but ultimately we would like to be able to help contribute to women who want to study apologetics at a graduate level, or at least a university level, even if they don't get a degree, maybe a certificate or something. So we're working toward the ability of being able to have scholarships so that other women who want to study are not hindered by a lack of funds.
Okay. And I'm just looking at number 3 here. It says provide apologetics engagements and training for women. Just briefly talk about those engagements. What do those entail?
We're working on having, this year we started something called Everyday Apologetics. So we're doing some online events, which are kind of like breakout sessions or keynote sessions that we would otherwise have at our conferences, but we have them online in smaller groups. And so we're working on having more of those virtual events so people can come together and learn. But we're also working on smaller, maybe regional conferences as well. So maybe once a year we have our big flagship kickoff conference, and then we take it on the road more or less and have potentially workshops or smaller conferences at individual churches in various regions throughout the country so we can draw more people in. We can take the same things, the same conferences, topics from that was in our annual conference and bring them to other locations where maybe people weren't able to travel because it's too far. So we're working on those. Plus, we just kicked off, I think we've had 3 or 4 of them so far, local meetups. So typically, anytime we have 1 or 2 team members that live in a particular area of the country that are kind of somewhat close to one another in proximity to one another, we are working on having meetups every so often so that people in that area can come and meet our team members and learn from each other, ask questions, share resources, connect contact information, and potentially at some point, we're kind of hoping that might be able to grow into some sort of a chapter or something like that. But in the meantime, we just want the people who are in various areas to be able to meet other women who are studying apologetics or at least interested in apologetics so they can start working together and learning together and sharing resources and information together through the introduction with our ministry. So we really have a lot of irons in the fire and really trying to work in all the ways that we can conceive how to bring women together, introduce them to apologetics, educate them, equip them, move them forward in their apologetics journey, and keep them connected to one another.
Wow, that's pretty exciting. And one of those initiatives as well is to partner with ministries who want to train women to reach more women with the gospel. How does that work?
Yes. So we don't have a fixed plan at this point, but we see ourselves as trying to create, obviously, we have a library of resources already, a pretty good library of resources just from the content we've already created. And each time we have a conference, we end up with more resources. So we are hoping to start looking for churches that would partner with us. So let's say I am a Bible study or a small group leader for moms, or potentially I'm working with young women in a youth group or something. And someone comes to me with a question. Instead of this particular person not having any idea where to go, any idea how to start, she goes to her pastor. She says, I don't know what to do with this. I've got this really strange question. I don't know how to answer it. Instead of having to borrow from the pastor's time and kind of help force him into a situation where he's got to teach her, even if he has that information handy, we would really like to find churches that we can partner with and essentially be their 24/7 apologetics library, so to speak. So by having an arrangement or some sort of relationship with women in apologetics, when these women, through their women's ministries, get connected to women in apologetics, if somebody has a question, then all they have to do is contact us and we can help them find resources. We can provide resources if we have them created ourselves. We can point them to resources if we don't have those resources created. We can get team members to come out and have a seminar if that's necessary. We can do online courses or online sessions where we help. We really just want to be a library of resources for churches so that especially if they're small churches or remote churches and they don't have the ability to have a dedicated apologetics department within their organizational structure, we'd like to come alongside and provide that for them, for the women in leadership roles within their church, so that they always have some way of getting the resources and the information that they need. They can even get, some kind of a personal mentorship if that's necessary. So we're working on putting ourselves into a position where we're growing the ability to have partnerships with these churches so that anyone in your church who has a question can get immediately connected to whatever help that they need. And that's really exciting. I don't think there is anybody else out there doing that. I'm not sure.
Maybe there's a church out there that maybe wants to partner with you and some of the things that you just talked about. What's the best way to get in touch with you?
My email is great. Lori@womenandapologetics.com. You're welcome to email me there. You can always find me there. We also have, I think, just a contact form on our website page too, womenandapologetics.com. You can get in contact with us there. It will go to the office, which eventually gets to me. So if anybody's interested in something like that, we would love to sit down and talk. We would love to maybe consider some kind of a pilot program or something, because we are so committed to the idea that women need these skills, and it needs to be as hassle-free and as friction-free as possible, helping these women find the resources that they need. And that's what we love to do. So I think it's a win-win all the way around.
A win-win, absolutely. And I'm going to put you on the spot here. And people have told me they hate when I do this, but can you just think of one story, one inspirational story of a lady out there that has gone through your courses, has been associated with you guys, and her life has really changed because she's now got the foundation of knowledge of truth that she didn't have before? Can you just kind of think of one story of a life change experience?
Yeah, most likely. Yeah, sure. Mine, certainly. I have a lot of confidence that I never had before. I think that's, like we mentioned earlier, that's a lot of what holds Christians back, is they don't have a lot of confidence. So that, I know that for me personally, I'm kind of confrontationally averse, and being an apologist and learning apologetics has made it much easier for me to take that risk of starting a conversation. I had one woman approach me at a dinner party. It didn't even have anything to do with church or apologetics, but she approached me at a dinner party because she knew what I did. And she said, "Hey, I've got this friend who's kind of into New Age, and she keeps insisting that New Age is the same as Christianity, and I don't know what to say." And I said, "Okay, we can handle that." And so I was able to get her connected with one of our quick guides. We have some friends that live in areas that have concentrations of Mormon families, and they don't know what to say. And I can say, "I've got that. I can handle that." WIA has a quick guide on Christianity versus Mormonism, so that you can have conversations with your friends that are Mormons or the ones that show up at the door. It really does. We had one lady, I think 2 weeks ago, basically, she went through one of our courses and she was so excited about it. She got a certificate at the end of the course that the course produces for her. And she took a picture with it on her Instagram and said how grateful she was that how much she had learned through this course. So yeah, I think that there's just all sorts of little ways that women are finding the confidence to say something, finding the confidence to kind of come out of their shell, to stand a little taller and be willing to share the gospel, or at least have a conversation with someone that they might never have considered having. I think there's a lot of women who, particularly, they have young adult children who go off to college maybe, or even in high school, who start to have significant doubts, and they can sit down and have a conversation with those kids and be able to explain that there are very real weaknesses in Darwinism that they wouldn't have learned that just from their Sunday school class or whatever, but they're able to say, look, in fact, I'm thinking of this one particular woman who had a conversation with a girl that she had mentored in high school who'd gone off to college, and they came back and met for coffee. And she said, "Okay, if you are going to be an atheist, if that's what you decide is true, what are the implications of your atheism?" And she had to think for a minute, and they talked through some things. And by the time they were at the end of that conversation, the young woman in college said, "I don't think that those implications of atheism actually explain some of the realities of the world we live in. I think Christianity explains it better." And so this woman was able to say, "Then I think you have reasons to believe that perhaps atheism and Darwinism isn't really the truth the way it's being taught to you." And I don't know that most women would be able to have that conversation without studying it specifically through apologetics.
Well, that's a heartwarming, encouraging, real life story. And I love to hear those. Lori, someone's listening to the podcast, or they're watching the interview, maybe on YouTube or Facebook or something like that, but they want to support women in apologetics financially, or they just want to learn more information about you guys. What's the best way to do that?
Always start with our website, womenandapologetics.com. You can pretty much find everything there. I'm so proud of our leadership. Our president does a really good job constantly working on our site and making it as easily accessible as possible. We do have a donate button. So if you want to give, it's right there on the front. It's nice and easy and accessible. You can donate to us. That would be great. We are working on expanding our staff so that we can produce all this additional content that we have been told, that we have learned people are asking for and they want to have available for them. So we're working on expanding our staff. So the donate button at womenandapologetics.com/donate. There's all sorts of information on our merchandise, our WIA Academy, all of our online courses, our free resources, our downloads and digital guides, and you can always sign up for our email community, in which case, if you do that, which also is at the top of our website, if you sign up for our email community, then we just send you some kind of an apologetics resource every single week, and then you get discounts. You get alerted to any of our online resources, our online classes, our new ones, on our conferences. You get discount codes for our conference tickets. So that's the best place to start is at womeninapologetics.com, and everything that you would need there, you can find there on our website.
Again, you guys have a tremendous amount of resources, and you can find those resources at womeninapologetics.com. Lori, thank you so much for coming on and telling us about women in apologetics.
You bet. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. I love the work that they do, and I appreciate you letting me talk about it.